are in the home stretch of this election season with just 18 days to go until Election Day. A lot of big issues on the ballot, from the president all the way down to local city and county races. And one of the biggest Bay Area races is in San Francisco. That is where voters are going to be choosing who leads the city. The mayoral race is going to be decided by ranked choice voting. That's been around for a while here in the Bay Area, but it can be a bit complicated and frustrating. Our Wilson Walker looks at the psychology of the vote and how it's put leaders in positions they would have otherwise lost.
Look, I have friends who hate ranked choice voting. They're convinced it's the root of all evil in Oakland.
Longtime Oakland political observer and now city council candidate Lynn Raphael is talking about how the votes are counted.
You either love it or hate it.
And in Oakland, this conversation still goes back to the city's very first ranked choice vote for mayor back in 2010.
Things look pretty good right now, but I don't understand ranked choice voting. So who the hell knows?
Don Parada did get the most first place votes, a whopping 40% of them. So very few people expected his 9-point lead to vanish. And that was just one race oddity.
The second piece that was unusual about that race was that the ranked choice tallies were not released for 3 days after the first place tallies had been released. And so the result was that for 3 days, people said, well, Don Parada is going to be the mayor. And then they ran the algorithm and the ranked choice tally and said, actually, he's not.
So it seemed like a plot twist.
It was very much perceived as something unusual has happened here.
Corey Cook is a professor of political science at St. Mary's. He has studied every single ranked choice vote in the Bay Area. And he says the Jean Quan result was both an outlier and a cloud that hung over her for 4 years.
Jean Quan, through no fault of her own, was viewed as not the legitimate winner of the mayoral election in Oakland, even though objectively she was the preferred choice.
This is the closest probably race for mayor in the history of Oakland.
But that dogged her throughout her mayoralty, the idea that maybe she had won through some sort of fluke or some form of gaming or some way that she understood a system somebody else didn't.
There is a sense among a lot of people, and there still is, that first place votes are the only true measure of a winner.
People are hungry for change. They're hungry for a different, more humane, more effective approach to criminal justice.
Another ranked choice vote that is often cited, Chesa Boudin's victory in the San Francisco DA's race, even though Boudin did receive the most first place votes.
In that particular race, the perception was he was only narrowly ahead, and therefore the moderate candidates were going to effectively pool the votes of moderate voters and go ahead of him, and they didn't. And again, the reason they didn't was because he was the most preferred candidate. But the sense was, oh, something prevented something that we thought was going to happen from happening.
So there are results that do produce backlash, but over time, even some of ranked choice voting's critics have just decided to live with it.
I've reconciled myself to it because I know it ain't going to change. And look, it had these laudable goals.
If you think about it, prior to ranked choice voting, 89% of Oakland elections were decided in a June primary.
Democratic organizer Sean Dugar is an RCV advocate. He points to payoffs like larger, more diverse electorates in November. And as for people who are unhappy with election results,
it's funny, right? Because we've had great candidates and we've had some not so great candidates elected under ranked choice voting. We've had some great candidates and some not so great candidates elected not under ranked choice voting, right?
And the vast majority of them would say, this worked really well, right?
All the races we're not talking about.
All the races we're not talking about, where the candidate actually increased their ballot share each round.
So these seemingly odd outcomes are just that. They are outliers and a function of our current politics, like it or not.
And I don't, that's been beaten out of me. I got it, I understand it.
Yeah, you play the game with the rules as they are written, not the way they were the last game or the way you might like to have them. You just play by the rules. Right now, we have obviously left out one significant example in all of this, that, of course, the last Oakland mayor's race.
Right now, we are ahead.
Yeah, Lauren Taylor, I was assigned to cover his election night event in Oakland, and I can tell you a lot of people in that room thought Lauren Taylor was on his way to becoming the next mayor of Oakland. Obviously, it did not work out that way. Shane Tao became the mayor, and she is facing a recall election. Now let's go back through the other races we mentioned. Chesa Boudin, he had the most first place votes. People were still upset with the outcome and what happened to him. Yes, he faced a recall and was ultimately removed from office. And then let's go back to Jean Quan. People may not remember this, but there was a move to recall Jean Quan. It just did not get enough signatures to get that on the ballot. So yes, there are savings with ranked choice voting, but there is also a cost, and that cost is clearly the perceived legitimacy in these polarizing, very close elections where people are unsure or frustrated or just disappointed by the outcome. You know, the next race, of course, here in San Francisco, how will this play out? That is hard to say. If you look at a lot of ranked choice votes, voters don't always align the way people might think they would. They don't say go from one candidate and then directly to another one who might share the views. They're a little less predictable than you might think they were. So how does it play out in San Francisco? That is a good question. One thing for sure, people have been wrong about a lot of these races in the past. How it unfolds here in San Francisco, a huge question as we head towards the election.
Wow, and of course, we'll be following it for you. Meantime, the city's Department of Elections has launched a massive multilingual outreach campaign. The goal is to inform voters about the city's ranked choice system. The department is distributing more than 300,000 notices. They tell us the goal is to ensure that every voter is well informed on how this works. Still ahead, how ranked choice voting is creating unlikely alliances in the San Francisco's mayor's race, and how it actually backfired a little bit. Well, today we are talking about ranked choice voting and whether people like the system or not. Well, some candidates are embracing it and shifting their strategy. For example, in San Francisco, in the mayoral race, Mark Farrell and Asha Safai have formed an alliance. They're asking their respective supporters to pick them first and then the other candidate second. They're calling on supporters of the other candidate to do the same thing.
And that is exactly why I'm asking all of Daniel Lurie's supporters that put him number one to specifically put me number two on their ballots. I do not agree with his tactics. I do not agree with his lack of experience, but I also recognize that many of his supporters want the exact same thing that I do, real change in San Francisco.
But the other candidates are not so happy with this arrangement. For example, Lurie's campaign says this is nothing but a way for insiders to protect insiders. Joining me now, Caroline Heldman. She's a professor at Occidental College. Thanks for being here today, talking about a subject that, people either love it or hate it, the ranked choice vote. Can you put in a nutshell really quickly what exactly we're talking about here? Because I know there's a lot of our viewers still right now saying, what?
Well, ranked choice voting is essentially an immediate runoff. So if you think about this in terms of a single candidate having to get at least 50% of the vote, if you go and you cast your vote, or voters vote for 5 different candidates and none of them get over that 50% line, then the person with the lowest number of votes out of the 5, their votes then get distributed to the other 4, and that process continues on until somebody gets over that 50% line. So I know it sounds complicated, but in New York, what they found when they instituted this is that 90% of voters, after they did it once, it was pretty clear to them.
So we are talking about some situations where the person who gets the most first place vote does not get the position. Is that fair?
Well, some would argue that it's not fair, right? That's one of the cons of ranked choice voting. The idea or the practice, the experience of the person who got the most votes, but not 50%, ultimately not winning the election. So it's a question of this when you think about fairness. Should the win go to the person who got a plurality of votes, but not a majority? Or should it go to the person who, when you combine first and second place preferences, or maybe third place preferences, they are the most overall popular candidate, just not the number one. And I know that sounds a little complicated, but basically, if you want to make it across that 50% line, you really need to be a liked candidate, not just by, you can't be a polarizing candidate. So if you look at who has not made it, so they get the plurality of votes, but then they go on to lose in ranked choice voting, it's polarizing candidates. So this maybe makes the elections more civil, and it makes candidates less extreme.
And then you see some of them forming alliances, like we just talked about in the San Francisco mayoral race. So what would be the best strategy there?
Well, Farrell's strategy, he is going to each of the other candidates and saying, hey, I know your supporters are not going to vote for me number one, but vote for me number two. He's kind of trolling for those votes just in case he needs them. So far, he's pulled out ahead of London Breed in the polls. She has a 66% negative rating. And so he is being very wise. He's not just going to one, but multiple candidates and trying to swing them in his favor. And this is really unusual in American politics, to have this sort of collaboration. And we've seen it more and more in Alaska and Maine and New York, where ranked choice voting has been put into place.
All right, I want to throw this example out for you, though. We just heard from the National Healthcare Workers Association, the union. They actually dropped their second place endorsement of Supervisor Safai, specifically because of that alliance. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know what Safai is getting out of this. I can see what Farrell is getting out of it. He gets the pro-union, much more kind of progressive or liberal bent, with Safai's all of his supporters going over to Farrell. But Safai is probably going to be out of it maybe first. So in that sense, he's essentially hurt his own campaign.
All right, unless he just gets a lot of those second place votes. It's a lot of math involved, and certainly we'll be covering it. Love your expertise all the time. Carolyn Heldman with Occidental College. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And of course, be sure to stick with CBS News Bay Area for all of your election coverage, and we'll have full results on election night on air, online, and streaming on the free CBS News app. We're going to be right back. Thanks for watching. You can always get all the latest headlines and weather over on KPIX Plus. And remember to like and click the button on the bottom left of your screen to subscribe for the biggest Bay Area news.